Video games are great, but regrettably there's only so much time in the day to play them, especially when one's got bills to pay. And so, as time becomes far more fleeting and our collection of software concurrently expands, sooner or later, they'll all become part of the dreaded backlog. I'll bet everyone who's clicked on this video has got a surplus of games they've owned for years, but just can't find the time and or energy to play them. A bad case of first world problems. Bearing this in mind, I thought it would be interesting to traverse my entire backlog of video games and give you all an understanding of just how deep this rabbit hole goes, as well as what experiences I've got to look forward to. And if you happen to be familiar with any of the titles featured, please let me know what I'm getting myself into. It may further my incentive to finally press the start button. Please bear in mind that my backlog only consists of games I've either not played or merely dabbled in for a paltry amount of time. What you'll see throughout this video isn't my entire video game collection, though given the breadth of software on display, it might as well be. I believe the best way to approach this endeavour is to cover each system I currently own, starting with the oldest ones, the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, both of which I shockingly don't have a backlog for, as I've played and beaten their respective collections, so it looks like we're going to jump ahead a generation with the PS2 and GameCube, beginning with the latter. My backlog for Nintendo's Lunchbox currently consists of only 9 games, primarily because the GameCube's library is lamentably small and I already own most of the big name titles, but also due to said software being fucking expensive, since the big game refuses to re-release many of its stellar exclusives, making even a singular purchase a hefty investment. Regardless, the first game on my GameCube bucket list received a remake this very year, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which I purchased during my second visit to London Anime and Gaming Con, good times, and is considered to be the best Mario RPG and one of the greatest RPGs of all time. And as someone who adored the original Paper Mario, I can't wait to give this one a go. I know the remake on the Switch does solve certain issues such as the backtracking, but I prefer to experience the classic version warts and all. Next, we have an iconic gem of the GameCube's library, Tales of Symphonia, a title commonly referred to as one of the greatest Tales games based on what I've heard from friends and fans. Currently, Tales of Arise is the only game in the franchise I've played and beaten, but this series is infamous among my backlog, which you'll understand as the video goes on, and I swore that this would be the next Tales game I would partake in. Plus, unlike Paper Mario, I don't have to deliberate over getting the Switch port, because I heard that version was shit! Here's a game that was actually a US import, Baton Kaitos, developed by Monolith Soft of Xenoblade fame. I was made aware of this title by one of my uni friends just as I was getting into the likes of Fire Emblem and Xenoblade. Thus, RPGs were very appealing to me at the time, and I picked this one up as soon as possible, which thankfully came with a disc that let me play region-free GameCube games, which is phenomenal future-proofing. From what I can tell, Baton Kaitos is a substantial hidden gem on an already niche system, so this should certainly be a fun undertaking. Now for something of a much darker caliber, Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. This is a rather infamous GameCube title due to being an excellent horror game that really messes with you psychologically, as well as trolling you with the infamous corrupted memory card incident among other events. While I'm not a horror aficionado, this game was continuously featured in discussions about the GameCube, so I figured I'd give it a go eventually. Another scary piece of software I need to brave is the Resident Evil remake, as while I would not call myself a Resident Evil fan, I'm well acquainted with several entries, plus both Resident Evil 4 and the RE2 remake make for some of my favourite games of all time. My brother is heavily attached to Resident Evil, and he's informed me that this is the best of the classic Resident Evil titles, a sentiment I believe the majority of the fanbase stands by, so I'm certainly curious to try and survive this nightmare. Next up to bat is Star Fox Assault, which I snagged back in March of this year when I went to the London gaming market with my friend Silver Safon, because it's been a bitch trying to track this one down, and while I wouldn't claim to be a Star Fox fan, I love 64 and the 3DS remake, plus I recall Assault being commonly lauded as the best entry barring the former titles. Additionally, it bears many similarities to Kid Icarus Uprising, and that's something I can get down with. Shifting from Star Fox to Star Wars, I furthermore own Star Wars Rogue Leader. Personally, I'm very much in the dark about this game, but I was informed that it's one of the better Star Wars video games, and to be fair, that's a particularly bold claim, for this franchise has some excellent tie-in titles. Thus, while my vision is somewhat clouded, I look forward to taking flight as some good old Rebel scum. Speaking of licensed games, I also own Spider-Man 2, the movie, the game, one of the web slinger's best outings, and a title that's had my spidey sense tingling for years now despite never giving it the time of day, which is odd as I own a number of Spider-Man games, including the PS4 one, so I'm highly enthusiastic to take this baby out to dinner.
Pizza time.
The final disc in my GameCube backlog is Viewtiful Joe 2, the irony of the situation being that I own the original for a different system, but more on that later. Now, I've seen the first Viewtiful Joe in action multiple times, but not once have I touched or witnessed anything concerning the sequel, so I'm essentially going in blind, but I have a feeling it'll be a keeper. Shifting gears to a more successful system, my PS2 backlog is currently comprised of 12 games, which is honestly rather minuscule considering how enormous the PS2's library is. And trust me, there are plenty of exclusive titles I wish to track down, such as the Sly Raccoon trilogy and Castlevania Curse of Darkness. On that note, the first game on my Sony bucket list is Castlevania Lament of Innocence, or in the UK it's just Castlevania for whatever reason. Both this game and its sequel are rather rare, so I was highly fortunate to add it to my collection given my extensive love for Castlevania. Plus this entry is cited as one of the more interesting outings for being in 3D and starring the original Belmont Leon, so that's certainly something of note. While we're on the subject of slaying demons, both Devil May Cry 1 and 3 have yet to be awoken, though I did sample Dante's first outing when I was much younger, but not enough to form a solid opinion on it, hence why it's part of the video. According to the masses, the OG game is dated but still playable, while DMC3 might as well be the second coming of Christ. People won't shut the fuck up about how evangelical it is. So yeah, it should be fun. I previously mentioned owning the first Viewtiful Joe for a different system, which was in fact the PS2, cause ironically, I can't find the original on the GameCube or the sequel on the PlayStation. A highly irregular situation to say the least. Nevertheless, you all know my standing with Joe, and I'm rather giddy to give his debut a shot. But if substantial differences between the PS2 and GameCube versions of both games, and if some sort of save data transfer feature exists, please give me the heads up. Now I'm stepping into more familiar territory with Ratchet & Clank, along with its sequel, Locked and Loaded. Yes, that is a sex pun and par for the course. In the early PlayStation era, I was more familiar with the Naughty Dog platformers as opposed to what Insomniac offered, though I still love Spyro the Dragon, and I adored Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction on the PS3, so I have no doubt both these games are going to be bangers, and heck, I may pick up the third entry if all goes well. Speaking of sequels, gaze upon God of War 2, mere mortals, and fuck me was this game making the rounds when it debuted. Everyone was losing their minds over how incredible Kratos' second adventure was, and regarded the epic saga as the peak of the PlayStation 2. And as someone who vastly enjoyed the first God of War, I'm certainly excited to see if this one lives up to the hype. Then again, that could be the mantra for this entire franchise given all the accolades. Here we have a fascinating PS2 license game, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, which I assume to be based off the anime of the same name. Those that know me well enough are aware that Ghost in the Shell is my favourite anime franchise alongside Gundam. I adore every pigment of this sci-fi masterpiece, and yes, that includes the live-action movie, so I'm ecstatic to plug in and play such a splendorous sequence of coding, and I acquired it for £15 in store while it was going for $75 on eBay. It's like it was meant to be. The remains of my PS2 backlog are all RPGs of some sort, the first of which being an obtuse purchase given my preferences, Disgaea Hour of Darkness, a series I've known about for a while, but only witnessed via trailers and Nintendo Directs and so on. So I personally have little to speak of, but from what I can tell, they're very fun titles and a proprietor of numbers porn, so if anyone has experience with the first game, please let me know what I'm getting myself into. Another PS2 RPG I need to conquer is Dragon Quest: The Journey of the Cursed Kingdom. If memory serves me correctly, this is the 8th main series title, and while I've never played a Dragon Quest game, I know I'm a monster, the store I was working for at the time was selling it, and my supervisor declared it to be one of the best Dragon Quest adventures, thus the rest is history. Plus, with the remakes coming out, this might be a sign to finally tackle said Dragon Quests. Another obscure selection from Sony's juggernaut is Odin Sphere, a title I knew bits and pieces of due to certain YouTube videos, but what sold it for me was the sprite work, which I still think looks incredible to this day, with said team still going strong with the recently released Unicorn Overlord, whose demo I was enamored with. So yeah, this game should be a real treat for hopefully more than just the eyes. Now we've arrived at my final PS2 game, and I am immensely conflicted about playing Persona 3 Fez. Currently, Persona 5 Royal is the only Persona game I've played and beaten, but I'm aware that 3 was where the series truly begun to forge its own identity, instead of being a sub-series of Shin Megami Tensei. In spite of such esteem, I am continually hounded by conflicting information that some versions of Persona 3 aren't worth playing, plus there's Persona 3 Reloaded, which I assume to be the definitive experience. Though at the very least, if I give this one a go, I've always got the remake to look forward to in the worst case scenario. The next system to scrutinize is our first handheld, the Nintendo DS. I used to own a GBA, but the console and all its games have since been lost, with my backlog consisting of 11 cartridges, which is likely to expand in the near future, given that there's a surplus of DS titles I wish to ascertain, though they're gonna cost a pretty penny, for Nintendo won't re-release a chunk of its library, much to the dismay of my wallet. First up for deployment, we have Advance Wars Dark Conflict, acting as the last entry until the series got a reboot on the Switch. And according to the grapevine, this game is fucking brutal, and the hardest installment thus far. So yeah, no pressure, but I do enjoy me some tactical warfare, so while it'll be one of the last missions I undertake, I have hopes the battle ends up being more fun than frustrating. Speaking of remakes, another Code 2 Memories and its sequel received Nintendo Switch enhancements, yet I must insist on experiencing the originals first, as while games of this particular genre generally don't gel with me, I can't help but be somewhat fascinated by the concept, and I'm privy to the opinion that this is one of the DS's superior titles, and thus may become quite the hidden gem. I additionally pertain another obscure cartridge in the form of Hotel Dusk Room 215. Much like another Code, these aren't what I immediately pick when it comes to my choice of entertainment, yet I've been made aware that this is a strong title, and I'm rather intrigued by both the premise and the stylistic aura the game emanates, so while I'm treading outside my comfort zone, hopefully it'll be worth the endeavour. Going from obscurity to abundance, we have a game which was everywhere during the DS era, Cooking Mama, which I'm certain was part of the Touch Generation lineup, or at the very least fits into said category. I have yet to play or own any other Cooking Mama game, but the series seems to be chugging along just fine. Plus, Minigame Software has a rather impressive reputation on the DS, just look at WarioWare and Mario Party, so I have a hunch that this delicacy is going to be rather tasty. Puzzle games subsequently found a home for themselves on the dual screen, thus I should give Puyo Pop Fever the time of day eventually. I'm not a Puyo Pop fan, but I do enjoy a good session every now and then, and being able to play this on the go makes it all the more enticing, though I would like to know how well Fever stacks up to the other Puyo Pop games for those who are in the know-how. Rhythm Paradise is another title I'm excited to explore, as I adore rhythm games, and on the DS specifically, Elite Beat Agent slaps so hard, I have no doubt this will be just as jammin'. Heck, I was exposed to significant discussions regarding how great the game is, plus various arguments were made for the chorus men to be playable in Smash for a while, so that certainly counts for something. Naturally, I'd have a Pokemon game in my DS backlog, for this series really thrived on the handheld. In this case we have Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time. Now while I lack any experience with the Mystery Dungeon franchise, it's been well documented to be one of Pokemon's best spin-offs, so I believe myself to be in good hands, though I'm painfully aware that Explorers of Time isn't the definitive way to play the DS Mystery Dungeon games, more on that later. I can't forget about Star Fox Command, as from what I can gather, this is an extraordinary, unique take on the franchise formula with how missions are structured and accomplished, along with all the what-if scenario endings, though your mileage may vary on the quality of said outcome. I'm not remarkably excited about this assignment, doubly so now that the Wi-Fi is down, and that was a big part of the game's appeal, much like Metro Prime Hunters, but I'm not one to pass up flying through space with Fox McCloud. My final game for the DS backlog, or more aptly put, games, are all to do with Sonic the Hedgehog, who shall be no stranger to my catalogue going forward, and I've got the entire Rush trilogy to play through at some point. Yes, this includes Rush Adventure, don't be fooled by the appearance of 2 Sonic Rush cases. For these titles have quite the caliber to them, for Sonic Rush is praised as one of Sonic's best 2D titles, Rush Adventure isn't considered to be as good yet still great fun, and Colors is debated to be one of the most underrated Sonic games, whom my friend Silver Safon can vouch for, and convinced me to track it down. So it's safe to say that I've got to get to these games fast. Now we shall head back to home consoles with the Nintendo Wii, the system I currently own the most physical games for, and unsurprisingly, it radiates my largest untouched library thus far, consisting of 15 titles. Thankfully, since I own most of the worthwhile Wii games, there's not much left for me to collect barring Last Story and Dokapon Kingdom. Plus, many of the games I've yet to experience are referred to as hidden gems, for Nintendo's Revolution truly did have several diamonds through this mire of shovelware. Once again, Sonic hops aboard the backlog with Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, another game I got at the London gaming market. Now, I'm not especially fond of the original Sonic Riders, and the less said about free riders when playing with the Kinect, the better. Zero Gravity, however, is one game I hear mixed things about, but some seem to be especially fond of this second attempt, so I figured fuck it, why not? Plus, Sonic's time on the Wii was generally pretty positive, so perhaps Zero Gravity can continue that streak. While not a Sonic game, Knight's Journey of Dreams is the sequel to the Sega Saturn classic, and was developed by Sonic Team, which I also purchased along with Zero Gravity at the same event. It really is like poetry. I've yet to play the original Knights, and to be honest, I recall the consensus being that this game is just okay. However, I've forever been curious to see what the franchise is all about. Plus, the Knights cameo in Sonic Adventure has stuck with me for years due to the otherworldly and whimsical vibes it perpetuates, so I believe Knights ironically deserves their time in the sun. I mentioned another code during the DS segment, and it received a sequel on the Wii, A Journey into Lost Memories, that was never released in the US until the recent remakes. Much like its predecessor, this isn't the typical gaming experience I habitually undergo, but I believe it'll be stimulating to see how the adventure plays out on the Wii, and how said follow-up compares to the forerunner title. Plus, if I like both games, then I'll for certain get the remakes, and that's a win-win for everyone. Now we've got a game I only picked up as a result of internet review scores, because when looking at boom blocks from a distance, I'd assume it to be yet another Wii shovelware title. But no, apparently this is legitimately one of the better Wii titles, so I'm curious to see if all that hype is real or if the journalists were just chatting shit. This is a title you wouldn't expect to be part of my library, Medal of Honor Heroes 2, a World War II first-person shooter, cause fuck me were those all the rage back in the 2000s. While I typically wouldn't give this game a second glance, like with Boom Blocks, one reviewer I've been watching for years now said that this was a good time, and I figured it might be worth a shot. Cause if pulled off right, FPS games on the Wii can be lots of fun. Speaking of which, after the huge disappointment that was the first Red Steel, I was delighted to hear that Red Steel 2 was miles better and used the Wii Motion Plus to great effect, so I have no doubt in my mind that I'm in for a good time with this title. Though it does make me wonder why they abandoned the franchise. Heck, I'd be down with a Red Steel collection for the Switch. I truly believe the series deserves another go. On-rail shooters were well suited to the Wii as opposed to traditional FPS games, and supposedly, Dead Space Extraction is within the top bracket of such genre, while also falling into the category of Wii side games, where big budget titles for the 360 and PS3 got Wii versions that were basically completely different games, with mixed results as far as the quality is concerned. Extraction could be viewed as a spin-off given it's a rail shooter as opposed to a survival horror title, though the former genre works great on the Wii, so I'm excited to see how well this pans out. Here's another on-rail shooter to add to the Wii's already overstuffed library, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles. From what I can tell, this is concurrently one of the better Resident Evil side games and Wii shooters, so I think I'm in good hands. Though I may play this after I'm done completing the classic titles, just so I have a better understanding of the full context, since these are retellings at the end of the day. Let's look at the title I played most of before quitting, Sin and Punishment Star Successor, which I snagged for £8 at GameStation when they were still in business. Man, what a bargain given the prices it goes for now. So yeah, I really enjoyed the game, but then got stuck on this one part and never went back. Thus, I really need to suck it up and stick it out to the end. Not to mention, it'll grant me further incentive to give the N64 original a shot too. Now we have one of the new Play Control line of games, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. These were a series of GameCube titles which added in Wii motion controls, the most famous among them being the Metroid Prime trilogy. Jungle Beat was widely considered to be one of Donkey Kong's better games, but since I don't own the bongos, I had to go with the Wii version, which apparently isn't as good, but did tweak certain game elements to make the adventure more accessible to the general audiences, so this may end up being more beneficial in the long run. I'm sure many of you are shocked I haven't played this one yet, Wii Sports Resort. Truth be told, I didn't get a Wii Motion Plus controller till Skyward Sword, and by then, the 3DS and Wii U were making the rounds, so I wasn't predominantly concerned with Wii Motion Plus games, hence why Red Steel 2 is in the backlog. That being said, Wii Sports Resort always looks like so much fun, as I adore the original, and more of that is something I'll happily indulge in. Oh, Punch Out for the Wii. Man, do I hear people singing this game's praises like nothing else, and from what I can perceive, this looks like an especially fun and technical slugfest, so the hype appears to be legitimate. This whole situation makes me wish Nintendo would make another Punch-Out game for the Switch, doubly so since ARMS did rather well, and the Joy-Cons are practically made for letting Little Mac lay the smackdown. no Backlog collection would be complete without Wario, with his Lost Warrior Land game The Shake Dimension, or simply Warrior Land Shake It in the US. Now I love the Warrior Land series, especially number 4, and I hear that The Shake Dimension is a fantastic game with some of the best hand-drawn sprites and artwork on the Nintendo Wii. I am aware that the motion controls can be a little awkward, but if the rest of the game is gold, then I can look past that. I feel somewhat dirty when discussing Trauma Center's second opinion, as I got this game for a measly £2.50, and I feel somewhat disingenuous for doing so, because apparently it's meant to be an incredible title that implements some of the best motion controls on the Nintendo Wii during all the surgical procedures. I haven't undergone any other Trauma Center games, but if this one ends up being a success, then I'll be happy to hunt down more of them and pay the devs what they're owed. The final game in my Wii treasure trove is Zack and Wiki Quest for Barbarossa's Treasure. This is one of Capcom's hidden gems, and a title many gaming sites proclaim to be one of the best Wii games. Truth be told, I got about 2/3 into this game but eventually just put it down, cause try as I might, I wasn't vibing with it at the time, despite loving the art style and use of motion controls. I do want to give this voice a full playthrough at some point, and hopefully I'll understand why it's considered such a treasure. Time to take hold of another handheld system with the Nintendo 3DS. And this backlog is noticeably minuscule, consisting of only 4 games. As not only do I already own a good portion of the 3DS's best titles, but I've poured so many hours into this system and played every game to just about completion, though I've got a few games left till my hands are clean of this portable. First up is Bravely Default, and this tale makes for an interesting beast, since I've reached the point of restoring the 4th crystal and getting the vampire job class, but for whatever reason, I stopped playing 2 years ago and haven't picked it back up since. And I was having a good time, mind you, so leaving Anya's on standby is unacceptable. Additionally, by completing Bravely Default, I can get started on Bravely Second. Truth be told, the masses tend to lean towards this game being weaker than both the original and Bravely Default 2, but I'm nonetheless intrigued to partake in the experience, for I have yet to witness the claim that this is a bad game. Codenamed Steam, I recall Nintendo pushing somewhat excessively around the time of its release, though I got mine much later and for only £8. Guess it should have been called Codenamed Steel. I don't know much about the whole thing, barring it's made by the Fire Emblem devs, and it's certainly got an interesting premise behind it. But hey, the gameplay looks similar to Valkyria Chronicles, so perhaps this oddity might just end up striking gold. Finally, there's Dead or Alive Dimensions, a game I gave the benefit of the doubt due to review sites and the demo I played, for I personally don't care for the DOA series despite all the tits and ass, but many critics were claiming that this was a really good fighting game for the system, and I enjoyed what the demo offered, and would like to verify if that gossip was legit, or if the public was blinded by all that booty. Time to dig through the backlog of the ill-fated Wii U, being only slightly bigger than the latter system's lineup with only 5 games. Since the Wii U had a paltry library and it already owned most of its best titles, so honestly there's not much else to look out for at this point. So Darksiders 2 was one of the first games featured during the Wii U showcase, and while I'm not acquainted with this franchise, I was impressed by the trailer and I figured I might as well give it a try. You usually can't go wrong with an intense action game. Here's one most players own for the Switch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I've been substantially tentative regarding completing this venture, as I did play it for a while and cleared one of the Divine Beasts, but the combat system rubbed me the wrong way and so I put it down and left it to gather dust. I will certainly finish this quest in due time, doubly so now that Tears of the Kingdom exists, but it's rare for me to not click with a Zelda game. This game felt like it would never see the light of day for the longest time, but Pikmin 3 did wonders for giving the Wii U some serious staying power, even though in the end it was ultimately fleeting. Currently I've only played Pikmin 1, but I hear the 3rd installment was the best until Pikmin 4 came along, yet that is still very high praise, so I'm eager to pluck this one from the shelf and witness it bear fruit. Oh god, Super Mario 3D World. This is the game the Wii U should have launched with, because that second trailer slapped so hard, and I'm constantly being made aware that this is essentially a much better 3D land. And while the Bowser's Fury version exists on the Switch plus there's online multiplayer, I'm happy to have the Wii U version function as my solo experience, which in specific instances can be for the better. This title is one that newcomers are better off getting on the Switch, Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE, which was certainly an odd crossover when looking at it from face value, but it's got a significant cult following that proclaim it to be a well-crafted game, and one I shall be streaming on Twitch eventually, as it was a sub-goal that we achieved. I'm certainly curious to bear witness to the end result given I love Fire Emblem, but I can't say much about Shin Megami Tensei, though at the very least I know that the music is gonna slap. Checking in with Sony once again, Now we have the PlayStation 4, and this backlog is pretty big, amassing a total of 12 games as the PS4 has a substantial assortment of software, and many of their titles are packed to the brim with content, so getting through just one can be quite the undertaking. Nevertheless, sooner or later, I will conquer these conscripts. To begin with, we have BlazBlue Central Fiction. Now I'm familiar with BlazBlue, as I fell in love with Arc System's Baby instantly, and I put a lot of hours into Continuum Shift Extended, with Central Fiction looking to be more of the same good stuff. Thus, I'm certain to have a joyous time beating the piss out of everyone as Noelle. I am horribly overdue a look at Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. When the first Xenoverse dropped, it made for a highly refreshing spin on the constant retelling of Dragon Ball sagas, and number 2 is seemingly even better. Plus, as one who grew up with and loves Dragon Ball, not to mention having played the shit out of Fighter Z, I have a feeling this will be a title I can really sink my teeth into. Shall we take a gander at Klonoa Fantasy Revere series? A franchise I've known about for a while, but never had the pleasure of coming into contact with. Whenever I was fortunate enough to witness screenshots and gameplay footage, I was enamored by it being a 2.5D platformer, and the magical, almost whimsical aura it emitted was comparable to Croc or Tombi 2 on the PlayStation, so colour me impressed. Speaking of platformers, I got a good chunk of the way through Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, but abruptly stopped. Now I've played many Crash games to hell and back more times than I can count, and from what I appraised, Crash 4 hosts some of the series' greatest gameplay and level design to date, but it becomes an insane beast when going after the box gems in a multitude of levels, and so I'm debating if I should return to this venture, as I always go for 100% in Crash games, but this particular trial is a literal nightmare. I find it fitting that Crash was originally called the Sonic's Arse game, for the Blue Blur is back with Sonic Frontiers. Truth be told, I played a demo of this at EGX 2022 and was very impressed, and currently I'm about an hour or two into the adventure and was enjoying myself. But then I stopped because I started the second run of Xenoblade 2, and that game requires a lot of attention. Though given all the Sonic content we're getting in the near future, I can envision myself making this disc a priority. My final PS4 platformer is Yooka-Laylee, a game I was buzzing with excitement to get my hands on. Banjo-Kazooie is one of my favourite games of all time, so getting the chance to play a spiritual successor is a yes in my book. Granted, I hear the game isn't more than just fine and ultimately unspectacular, but I am more than happy to play a well put together 3D platformer. Plus there's the impossible layer, which is where the real quality seems to lie. Since I missed out on the PS3, I was delighted to nab the Uncharted collection, for those games are some of the most iconic and well received of that era. Or at least the second and third ones are, as Uncharted 1 is meant to be noticeably dated and janky in today's age, but even still, Uncharted 2 alone is sure to be worth the price of admission. Nathan Drake's escapades were clearly inspired by Lara Croft, which is a lovely segue into Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I'm well overdue to get through, for I love the Tomb Raider reboot and its sequel, Rise of the Tomb Raider. Thus, I'm certain Shadow will cap off the series nicely. Regrettably, the praise for this game isn't as outspoken as the others, but even the weakest entry in a trilogy can still be a great time. So it turns out DMC3 may not be the holy grail of the hack and slash genre, for supposedly Devil May Cry 5 is just as good if not better than DMC3. My brother, while not familiar with the prior titles, did mention how amazing this one was, so I get the feeling I'll have a sensational time, but that's to be expected of Dante barring DMC2, which yes I did play much to my regret. I feel so bad for dropping Elden Ring. I put a good few hours into this game and was really loving my time. But since the journey was so huge, I just stopped and focused on other things that were more digestible, and unfortunately haven't gone back since. Which is a shame given its recent DLC, plus my brother, sister, and buddy Abyss Walker cannot stop raving about how incredible the adventure is, so I think I've got to suck it up and stick it out eventually. Here's a fun bit of trivia. While I haven't played Final Fantasy 15, this was the first Final Fantasy game I ever purchased, because up until 2 years ago, I had never ever touched this series, and only started to get involved once I began the original FF7. I hear that 15 is one of the better entries, so I'm hoping its rep is for real. We've made it to the end of the PS4's library with the Kingdom Hearts collection, which has cemented itself in such an oddball position, as I'm streaming the entire series on Twitch, and currently we've only played through the first Kingdom Hearts. I didn't like it. Next up is Rechain of Memories, and everyone, and I mean everyone, is excited for Kingdom Hearts 2. I simply need to find the time to get the crew back together to tackle these games, and hopefully the collection offers more good memories than bad ones. Now it's time to switch things up with my newest system, the Nintendo Switch, and this backlog is honestly not too bad, currently only consisting of 7 games. since I already own most of the Wii U ports and first-party titles, and unless it's a third-party exclusive, I'm better off getting multi-platform games elsewhere, for certain ports are difficult to stomach on the Switch. First up to the docket is Astral Chain, made by the wonderful folks at Platinum Games of Bayonetta fame. Many of my friends go on and on about how incredible this game is, and as someone who loves Bayonetta, I'm fairly certain I'm in for a good time with this baby. Speaking of Bayonetta, the third game in this series is one I shall play very soon, as I'm planning to cover it for Halloween on Twitch this year, yet there's a number of pretty contentious opinions about Numero 3, primarily regarding the story and characters, though thankfully not the gameplay, but I'm curious to witness what within the game's script has got people in such a tizzy. On the topic of streaming, Bravely Default 2 was our 1,500 follower goal on Twitch, which we achieved earlier this year, so expect a playthrough of that very soon. I did stream the demo once and was impressed by what I played. Gloria alone sold me on the premise, doubly so after experiencing much of the first game and having greater clairvoyance regarding the improvements. Not to mention my friends love this game to death, so that's certainly reassuring. Another piece of Square software I haven't touched is Triangle Strategy, a game I should have picked up earlier as the demo was a splendid experience, plus I had multiple friends telling me how excellent the game was, so it's a crime to let this one simmer for so long, but after completing both Octopath games, I'm certain this cartridge is going to score on all fronts. Daemon X Machina was a game I was following closely leading up to its release, though I somewhat petered off course once I was informed of it being good but nothing special. Though since I'm such a big fan of Zone of the Enders, a mecha action game made by Hideo Kojima, this is right up my alley, and is certain to satiate my Gundam itch. Funny story about this one. Shin Megami Tensei 5 was teased during the Switch's debut presentation, but then we heard nothing about it for years. It became a running gag as to whether or not we'd get news about it during each direct, and I made a bet with my friend Maggie that if it ever came out, I would buy a copy even though I didn't care for the franchise. Turns out she got the last laugh, and what's worse is that now there's a definitive edition, so I'm not sure if the standard release is worth starting, or if I'd be better off just to go straight into the new one. Please let me know in the comments. Also, if you're wondering why I'm only showing the cartridge, well, I bought this at a GameStop during my first visit to the States, for the Switch is region free, and since it was pre-owned, the casing was, well, yeah. Finally, we have Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, a game I received as a gift from my buddy Farah during my initial visit to the US at the Too Many Games Expo. Love you very much, man. Now I've played and beaten the original Xenoblade Chronicles, and made a video about why it's a masterpiece. But this version, despite what IGN says, is essentially improving upon perfection, plus there's the future connected extra campaign, and more Melia is never a bad thing. Well, that certainly took a while, but yes, that is my entire video game backlog. Or half of it, for what you all witnessed was my physical games. Now it's time to uncover all my unplayed digital ones, starting with none other than the Nintendo Wii. The Wii was my initial exposure to an online distribution service with the Wii Shop channel. God, I have an abundance of nostalgic memories browsing the catalogue and checking in for new titles, and I subsequently downloaded and conquered a fuck ton of games, causing said digital backlog to be comprised of 9 channels. Most of which are retros, so they shouldn't take too long to complete once I get around to them. First up is Strider, a game I played a few levels of but didn't do much else after that. Truth be told, Strider is a character I only cared about due to him being my main in the Capcom Vs series. His games were never really the drawing point, but I'm sure if I sat down and gave his debut a chance, I'll be a happy bunny. Here's one that's going to confuse my American viewers, Super Probotector, which is just Contra-free with a new name and the characters being changed to robots for some baffling reason. Localization is weird. I did partake in co-op with my friend a few times and it made for some epic shit, but we never reached the finale and that's something I want to commit to eventually because Contra goes hard. Dude, the Wii was my introduction to classic Mega Man and I played so much Mega Man 2 and 9, so it sucks that I never finished Mega Man 3. For the record, I did defeat all the Robot Masters, but this will beyond the matter, and truth be told, I'm aware that the Doc Robot sections are a hassle, but I've always wanted to see how well Rockman 3 stacked up. Naturally, I downloaded all 3 classic Sonic games for the Wii, though sadly only vanilla Sonic 3 was available, and while I did play these games quite a bit, specifically Sonic 2, I was unfortunately incapable of reaching the very end or collecting all the Chaos Emeralds, something I do want to achieve, though in Sonic 3's case, I'll just play the version featuring Knuckles to get the full experience. You can bet your bottom dollar I installed a bunch of Mario games onto the Wii's memory unit, and thanks to various Japan exclusive titles being available on this service, I ended up procuring the lost levels. Honestly, I doubt I'll ever beat this game. It truly feels like an unfair ROM hack most of the time, but perhaps it would make for something fun to stream just to watch me suffer. Funny enough, I also own the US version of Mario 2, Doki Doki Mario as they call it, and I haven't beaten the game either. For the longest time, people considered this the weakest of the NES trilogy, but in recent years, I know a few individuals who believe this bootleg Mario to be superior to the NES classic, though neither of which compared to Mario Bros. 3. Regardless, I figured it'd be cool just to see how much fun Doki Doki Mario really is. I know I'm gonna get hate for this one, but yeah, I've never beaten Super Mario World. Now I've played it a number of times, but I couldn't get enthralled into the experience despite the game's many amazing qualities, though I was also rather young when I went about trying to conquer Dinosaur Land, so perhaps age and wisdom will permit me to see what all the fuss is about. Here's a game that technically doesn't belong to me, as Yoshi's Story was software that my sister downloaded, but she got bored of it rather quickly, and the typical opinion of the game is that of a mediocre platformer, so perhaps she was onto something. Regardless, I admire the visuals and vibes that Yoshi's Story gives off, and I'm curious to discover whether there's something special hidden under all this wholesome. The final game on my SD card is Lost Winds, part of the WiiWare software lineup, which consisted of numerous smaller titles, some of which were exclusive to the Wii that could only be downloaded via the Wii Shop channel, which sucks in hindsight since it's been discontinued. God, I wish I got Castlevania Rebirth. Anyway, Lost Winds was essentially the pioneer of WiiWare given all the exposure leading up to its release, and I liked what I played but didn't get very far, so I'm curious to see if it ended up being a strong start for the service. Now we have our first and only handheld in this video to have a digital library, not counting the Switch, and fuck me is the 3DS packing a big one. The result of the eShop closing down not too long ago forced my hand to obtain as many essential games as I could, just in case they never got re-released. As such, my microSD card is powered up to 18 untouched titles, so better plug in that charger, we're gonna be here a while. Let us begin with 3DS specific software, and technically, I've already beaten 2/3 of this title, the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney's Collection. Currently, Trials and Tribulations is the only game in the trilogy I have left to play, which just so happens to be the best one, go figure. Further compounded by the fact that I am friends with an assortment of people who cannot stop gushing over Phoenix Wright, so I better close this case sooner rather than later. Here's an interesting choice of coding, Shin Megami Tensei 4. Honestly, I don't know why exactly I bought this game, as it was long before I played Persona 5, but I do remember my friends speaking highly of the series, plus at the time it was discounted for a pretty hefty saving. Lucky for me, because this is a bitch to get physically, especially the Apocalypse version. Now we've got some games that thankfully aren't locked to this system anymore, both Etrian Odyssey 4 and Untold, with the latter being available in the recent revamped collection. I got these two titles for less than £5 while the eShop was still running, primarily because my friend Maggie couldn't stop raving about how incredible these games were, especially the third one, so this is the series I'm keen to uncover, plus the artist has done some very nice work for Fire Emblem Heroes. Harmon Knight was a game I procured due to looking like a pretty fun and unique rhythm game, plus being developed by Game Freak was a nice little bonus. I can't say much outside of hoping to get some sort of port later, and on that note, Pool Box caught my eye as it seemed like a very sweet little puzzler, and I figured I might as well give it a shot. While I have yet to actually shoot said shot, please let me know if all that glitter ends up being gold. This little baby has recently become available on the Switch, Luigi's Mansion 2. I played and rather enjoyed the first game, but supposedly the second one is the weakest of the three. Nevertheless, I'd still like to give it a try, and funny story incoming, as this game was a freebie I received, since years ago, players could use the gold coins they accumulated on one's Nintendo account to download free games among other various treats, and the cost of coins was rather minimal. Man, I miss when Nintendo gave a shit about its community. Time to tackle the retro section, though this title dates back to the original PlayStation, for Rayman is a game I started back in 2000 when my family first obtained the PS1, but I only got as far as the music land, and according to the grapevine, the second half of this game is a bitch to play, but I would love to finally complete Rayman and bookend this long-winded chapter of my life. Since I bought the 3DS before the price drop, I was lucky enough to be featured in the Nintendo Ambassador program, which offered users 10 free NES and GBA games, the latter of which we're going to discuss, starting with Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Truth be told, I played this baby a number of times on my Visual Boy Advance emulator growing up, and rather enjoyed my time, but I've yet to complete the entire quest, though apparently this is a rather botched attempt at a Metroidvania. But I'll see for myself just how botched this Puffball's attempt at replicating Miss Iran is. WarioWare, a series I thought was so odd and stupid until I played Smooth Moves and never looked back, so I'm intrigued to see how the franchise began and the type of microgames that could be achieved on the GBA. Here's one that got a remake of sorts on the Switch, Mario vs Donkey Kong, a spin-off series I admire quite a bit as I invested a lot of time into the second game, March of the Minis. And though the original is not like the DS entries, it's widely considered to be one of the best titles on the 32-bit handheld, so I hope this monkey isn't going to give me the banana slip. Hey! Here's possibly the most underrated game in the Zelda series, the Minish Cap. One I played a decent chunk of back on the emulator, but never completed, and it's a crime that I didn't. I loved my initial experience, and numerous Zelda fans make a big deal about how overlooked this handheld adventure is, though that seems to be the case for a number of portable entries. Speaking of Zelda, I also have the special edition digital release of Four Swords. Now I have yet to play either the original or the GameCube Four Swords Adventure, and I doubt I'll run into many people who also own said software for some local co-op, but I'm curious to see how the adventure pans out when flying solo. All that's left are the Game Boy games, and both Link's Awakening and Oracle of Seasons are titles I've played in the past but never completed, though I did pour a number of hours into the former, and I had a great time. I don't hear many discussions about the Oracle games, but my sister really liked them, and when it comes to Zelda, you're more often than not in good hands, so I've got nothing to fear. Super Mario Land 2 is a game I've somehow never played, despite investing so much time into the original growing up it wasn't even funny. But supposedly the sequel is better in every way, and a damn good 2D Mario game to boot, plus it marked the debut of Wario, so that certainly counts for something. Speaking of Mr. Garlic, Wario Land 3 is a game I've witnessed considerable praise for, with some claiming it to be the best entry that surpasses even the likes of Wario Land 4. Given my adoration for the latter title, that's some enormous shoes to fill, but I have no doubt I'm in for a golden time, as Wario's platforming adventures are excellent and we frantically need more of them, Nintendo. Finally, Kirby shall close out the 3DS with Kirby's Dream Land 2. I was enamored with the first Kirby's Dream Land as a kid, but like with Mario, I never got around to playing its sequel, and I hear this game is good but not exactly one of the Puffball's best outings, though for a Kirby game to be a simple yet fun time is more than enough for me. In the context of digital games, my Wii U shares a similar fate to the 3DS, as I downloaded a large selection of software before the eShop went down, 16 of which I have not played and just so happened to be tied to the Virtual Console. Cause fuck me did the Wii U have some of the best legacy titles in its catalogue, and so many hidden gems it's not even funny. This makes the situation surrounding the Switch Online all the more soul-crushing, though I can't deny that the N64 has received some serious love. First up are the GBA games, starting with Castlevania, better known as Circle of the Moon in North America. Currently, this is the only Castlevania on the 32-bit handheld I haven't traversed, which is a darn shame as I can't harp on enough about how amazing Aria of Sorrow is, and though I hear this one is the weakest of the three, as long as it follows the Metroidvania format, I think I'll be in good hands. Now here's a GBA RPG I've heard so much about, Golden Sun and its sequel, Lost Age. Whenever the topic of best GBA games comes up, or forgotten Nintendo franchises, you can bet your bottom dollar Golden Sun is going to be there. So naturally, I'm very excited to try this baby out, though I do hear one or two voices protest that this supposed classic is overrated and hasn't aged very well, but only time will tell if that argument holds water for both titles. Another highlight of the GBA's library is Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, another game I did sample back on the emulator, and yeah, it's as incredible as everyone says, but I've yet to complete the entire thing. Currently, Bowser's Inside Story is the only game in this spin-off series I've beaten, incredible by the way, with the majority of voices declaring both titles to be where the franchise peaked, so I'm certain to be in for a magnificent Mario adventure. Drill Dozer was such an out-of-left-field pick. Being developed by Game Freak of all people, this game never released physically in Europe, and prior to purchase, all I knew about Drill Dozer was her roles and assist trophy in Smash. But I saw a couple of videos showcasing software, and I thought it looked pretty fun, and I'm just thankful the game existed in a legal format for us Europeans even for a short while. I already snagged every Fire Emblem game on the Wii U, and I also happened to garner both Advance Wars 2 and Dual Strike for the Game Boy Advance and DS respectively. Like with Dark Conflict, I've only played the first Advance Wars, but I adored just about every pixel of its programming, yet unlike the latter DS game, I'm privy to little if any information about either of these entries, though if they're on the same level as the GBA Classic, I've got nothing to worry about. Going back to Game Freak, I caught 2 Pokemon games and added them to my collection, those being Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky and the original Pokemon Ranger. Explorers of Sky is cited as the peak of the Mystery Dungeon format, and essentially the Pokemon Platinum for this spin-off series. So while I may have wasted money on getting Explorers of Time, I can at least try out both and witness how superior Sky is. And Ranger is another applauded spin-off series that I've always been curious to check out, and getting it physically wasn't exactly the best option in this day and age. I didn't download a single DS Mario game, as I own most of them physically, but I did snag myself The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, sequel to Phantom Hourglass, and I tried the latter game once, but it didn't click with me. Though if you thought that the Minish Cap was underrated, Zelda fans really go out of their way to bolster up this little gem, so I'm curious to know if this supposed hype train is legitimate. The final DS game in my Wii U backlog stars the pink puffball in Kirby Mass Attack. Now I'm no Kirby enthusiast, but doing some research led me to discover that Mass Attack tends to be pretty well received, and I've always wanted to become more familiar with the Kirby franchise, so I figured here would be a good place to start. And the game does look to be a unique twist on the traditional formula, which I hope yields some tasty results. Now it's time for the Wii directory, and can I just say whoever was in charge of the Wii's Virtual Console lineup is a fucking legend. So many hidden gems and the best of the console's library was available to Wii U owners, and I will be eternally grateful for that. In fact, Kirby made his home on my system twice with Kirby's Adventure, or Return to Dreamland for those in the US. I heard that this was essentially traditional Kirby at its best, which is a reassuring synopsis, and Kirby already struck gold on the Wii with Epic Yarn, a game I seriously adore, so I have high hopes for this return to form. Turns out the Rhythm series wasn't content being restricted to just the DS, as Beat the Beat Rhythm Paradise is the franchise's foray onto the Nintendo Wii, and I hear it's one of the series' best, so that's saying quite a lot. I previously expressed my love for rhythm games, and based on the gameplay videos and trailers, this one looks to be a groovy time. And can anyone recommend me specific future installments? Because I honestly can't get enough of this shit. This next title I fittingly had no idea existed until they announced the eShop was shutting down, A Shadow's Tale, which seems to be a unique side-scrolling puzzle platformer where everything is presented in a shadow format, leading to some highly creative and off-the-wall level design. The reviews for this game were strong, and the price for a physical copy was frightening, so I figured, why the hell not? Hopefully there's more light than darkness with this diamond. My final digital Wii game I had no luck finding physically, thus I was delighted that I could snag the digital version of New Play Control's Pikmin 2. I vastly enjoyed the first Pikmin, but the second one was rare, especially on the GameCube, and finding it on the Wii wasn't much easier. I've been made aware that the sequel adds a surplus of excellent new features, but also a barrage of frustrating elements into the mix, though I'm just excited to play more Pikmin and try out the Wii Remote control scheme, which apparently works wonders for these particular titles. Only one game remains on my Wii U's external hard drive, belonging to the N64, Bomberman 64. Now I like Bomberman as much as the next schmuck, but 64 stands out for having a full-on adventure mode and isn't just arena battles till the cows come home. In fact, a YouTuber I admire a lot, CJS01, mentioned it in many of his videos and it concurrently became stuck in the back of my mind. Thus I figured I may as well give the good old Bomber the benefit of the doubt and see if its N64 adventure is an explosive time. Now we're upgrading to the PlayStation 4. And fuck me, Freddy Sideways, is this backlog bad, as I've got 27 games to get through, and a sizable selection of these titles are collections, so that's an even greater surplus of software. Damn you Sony and your incredible discounts, I just can't help myself with these savings. Nintendo, you could seriously learn a thing or two from them, because I never see Breath of the Wild go for less than £40, which after 7 years is utter horseshit. One of the perks of the PS4 was that several retro titles received HD upgrades, one of which was Ape Escape 2. Now I own the original on the PlayStation and it's a damn good time. Plus I do remember seeing a trailer for the sequel in my younger years and I thought it looked pretty dope. Hopefully it's not just nostalgia talking and the game ends up being excellent, because I am not in the mood for any monkey business. While I associate this game more so with the Xbox brand, Psychonauts was always that oddity that nagged at the back of my mind, but wasn't something I was particularly interested in, though given several YouTubers I frequent voiced their adoration for this obscurity, along with the sequel being apparently incredible, I think this should make for an interesting experience at the very least. The Jak and Daxter series will forever be a highlight of my PlayStation 2 journey, though I missed the opportunity to play Jak X Combat Racing, so I'm at least grateful I now own the damn thing. I have observed a recent resurgence of acclaim for this game as an underrated kart racer, plus Naughty Dog already knocked it out of the park with Crash Team Racing, so I get the feeling this game will be exactly what I'm looking for.
Done!
What say we cover some full-on remakes, starting with Spyro the Reignited trilogy. While I will forever prefer Crash Bandicoot, the PS1 Spyro games are true classics, and both the second and third entries were some of the best offerings on the system, and given that this remake essentially grants the Purple Dragon the Insane trilogy treatment, I can't wait to discover how well each game holds up, plus any and all improvements which were made. Hopefully Spyro 3's minigames are actually fun this time. Fucking hell do I hate the fact that I have not played the Resident Evil 4 remake yet. The original is one of my favourites of all time, and this restoration is supposedly just as incredible, but also being a unique experience that doesn't replace the golden oldie. At the very least, I'll probably stream it over Halloween, but man Capcom, you are in one hell of a golden age if the Resident Evil remakes are anything to go off. While this isn't a remake, I did get the remastered version of Gravity Rush, one of the PlayStation Vita's most iconic titles that got ported to the PS4, a fate which befell much of the Vita's library. Given that this was one of the system's standout games, plus the fact that there's a sequel, I'm curious to witness how the original plays, and considering the frequency of which the second game goes on sale, I'll probably divulge into exploring that one too. Now here's a remaster I'm itching to play, Dark Souls, then swiftly moving on to Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, the former of which is one of our Twitch follower goals. I may as well dub my PS4 the Souls Machine, given the games I just listed, plus Elden Ring and Bloodborne, with my brother and a multitude of friends fawning over the original Dark Souls as if it was their own child. Naturally, I'm excited to get slaughtered 5 ways from Sunday, plus Dark Souls 3 is said to be excellent for newcomers and perpetuates the greatest assortment of bosses, along with Sekiro's movement and parry system, making the experience extremely exhilarating. Speaking of Souls, Neo is a title my friends recommended highly, as they claimed it to be one of the better Souls clones long before Lies of P came out. I already dig the game's setting and vibe, heck this could be interpreted as a side grade to Sekiro given the time period and atmosphere. Plus, it was fortunate enough to earn itself a sequel, so here's hoping this baby lives up to the hype and makes for a very worthy investment. Funny enough, I always thought the main character of Neo looked a lot like Geralt from The Witcher 3, a subsequently fitting comparison since I still haven't played Witcher 3 or any of its DLCs. And man do I feel like I'm missing out, as it's meant to be one of the best games of all time! Heck, I haven't even read the books or watched the Netflix series. Oh god, I really am missing out. At the very least, I doubt I'm going to be disappointed with this title, given all the accolades. As if having friends who can't speak highly enough of Witcher 3 was one thing, but many of the same companions speak just as fondly about Dragon Age Inquisition. Truth be told, I know fuck all about the Dragon Age series, but I'm always up for trying out new things, and the acclaim for this game on all fronts is substantial. Not to mention, I got the entire package plus all the DLCs for £8, which is a fucking steal, so given all the content on hand, I'm certainly getting my money's worth. Going from a colossal RPG to a much smaller platforming hybrid, we have Child of Light, a game I didn't know much about, simply that it was supposedly excellent and looked like something an indie dev would make, yet it was held by Ubisoft. Turns out they could do more than just open world fetch questing. Little games like this I'll always have a soft spot for, so to those who have played this gem, please let me know what I have to look forward to. If you want to talk about RPGs though, I have both Tales of Vesperia and Zestiria on this system. Now I've already mentioned my history with the Tales series, and these games are said to be some of the more interesting entries going off what friends of fans have relayed to me. But since I'm otherwise new to the franchise and not used to the typical Tales experience, perhaps I'll have a different perspective. Heck, Arise is meant to be pretty obtuse, and I had a blast barring the boss's fuck you Dolahim. Transitioning from Tales to Trails, I also owned the first 3 Trails of Cold Steel titles, which happened to be our next Twitch follower goal at the time of this recording, and I did play the third game for a while as part of a job application. It's a long story. Now this franchise has been making a name for itself in recent years, and my buddy Deadly S'more is the biggest Trails fan out there who's converted many an ally to said series, so I know I'm in for one hell of a time once I start streaming these subordinates. There was one other game I played for said job application, Death End Request 2. Now I have never tried the original, and though I almost finished the sequel, I stopped right as the position I applied for fell through. Though I do wish to bear witness to how the story ends, for I enjoyed this strange mix of horror, visual novel and RPG elements, and if it concludes on a good note, I'll happily give the first game a try. Speaking of visual novels, I went out of my way to purchase Code Realize Bouquet of Rainbows, which contains the first 2 games Guardian of Rebirth and Future Blessings. Now I don't typically play visual novels, but as I mentioned in Top 10 Guilty Pleasure Anime, I enjoyed the anime adaptation to the point of wanting to give the source material a go, and so I'm curious to see what the story was originally like and how it compared to its anime counterpart, cause something about this series tickles my non-existent ovaries. On the subject of anime-inspired games, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is a mission I'm well overdue undertaking, as I relished the original despite all the jank, and the second one was a very interesting experience that we recently streamed over on Twitch. And according to friends, VC4 is the best of the bunch and fixes many of the gameplay problems that plagued the first entry. And if so, then we're potentially looking at a game that could enter my top 30 of all time. If you want to talk about anime and warfare, then look no further than Gundam Versus, a game I had no clue about, but I bought it because I fucking love Gundam and it was on sale for £2, so even if it ends up being a bad time, it won't feel like I wasted my money. Plus, if the opposite occurs, then man did I hit the jackpot. And something tells me I'm going to enjoy this game on the grounds of it being Gundam. Yes, I am that much of a shill. Speaking of mechs, I also got Titanfall 2 for cheap, and I'm constantly being reminded that this is one of the best first-person shooter games in the last 10 years, as well as being hugely underrated, since it unfortunately came out during the same year as Battlefield 1, Doom 2016, and Overwatch. Poor thing never stood a chance. Now, I have never played the original Titanfall, but I can't seem to escape the critical praise for its sequel, so I'm confident that going in blind isn't going to be a problem. Here's another game with machines that I started but didn't get too far into, Horizon Zero Dawn, what many consider Sony's answer to Breath of the Wild, and how fitting that I've invested the same amount of hours into both titles. Truth be told, my brief experience was a pleasant one, and now that it's become a fully fledged franchise, there's no better excuse to get engrossed in this world and see what lies beyond the horizon, because who doesn't love robot dinosaurs? Here's a long-awaited sequel I was super excited for, and it's a shame I haven't invested a lot of time into Soul Calibur 6. I did play it for a bit when it dropped and loved browsing for all the custom characters people submitted online, but for whatever reason, I just kind of dropped the game and really need to pick up the controller again, since both Soul Calibur 1 and especially 2 are some of the best fighting games ever made, and I felt that 6 was a great return to form after 3, 4 and 5 were kinda meh. On the subject of fighting games, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite are titles I played at friends' places, but never alone, and that needs to change, because I have poured so many goddamn hours into MVC2. And yes, while neither of these games are as good as that masterpiece, they're still tons of fun, and I will never say no to some Marvel vs. Capcom goodness. The way I popped off during that Nintendo Direct was something else. Our next game in the docket is a collection from Capcom, the Mega Man Anniversary Collection, containing Mega Mans 1 to 11. Now, I do love me some classic Mega Man and really want to give the likes of 6 and 7 a try. They seem like a great time. In fact, this collection stands as a sub-goal for the Twitch channel, because I'm sure it'll be fun to watch me pull what little hair I have out trying to beat Mega Man 1, and apparently 4 is meant to be quite hard. Though thank God there's no Mega Man in base, since that game is...
For fuck's sake, you didn't make the last 2 Fortresses gauntlets and now all of a sudden you want to make them marathons again?
Certainly something. Our final entry in the digital PS4 backlog is a compilation from Konami, the Castlevania Collection. Now, I already own Requiem because fuck yeah, Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, and I've previously played a number of titles the former collection contains, though there's a couple of oddities I'm interested to try out for the first time. Maybe now I'll finally beat Simon's Quest or see what Kid Dracula's all about. And now that the Castlevania Dominus Collection has become a reality, there's no better time to go vampire hunting. Let us pay a visit to the Nintendo Switch once again, and thankfully this will be a short one since I've only got 12 digital games I need to make time for. Mostly because I prefer to own things physically if possible, and the Switch's storage space even after getting a microSD card isn't exactly stellar. Not to mention the current eShop is an embarrassment, so I don't frequent it, but I did find a number of diamonds through the mire. So a game that I'm a good chunk of the way through but need to complete is the original Final Fantasy VII, making it my first ever Final Fantasy adventure, and yeah, while it's aged in many areas and isn't anything special gameplay wise, I'm still having a fun time, and sweet lord do I love the art direction so much. Midgar is one of the coolest fictional landscapes ever designed. Hopefully the whole journey will earn this title its legendary status, and I'll be sure to jump aboard the remake hype train. Another game I played a bit of while on holiday in the States with my friend Maggie was Cuphead, something I always wanted to try, and though it didn't click with my brother, I had a great time and couldn't get enough of the incredible animation, so I would be amiss to not play through the whole thing and the DLC either alone or with a buddy, but fuck me is this game hard! Here we have yet another remarkable indie title, Shantae Half Genie Hero. Currently, I've only played and beaten Pirate's Curse, which was an incredible game mind you, but also different from Shantae's usual adventures, and while I'm aware Half Genie Hero goes back to her more traditional roots, I think this will be a great way for me to experience what Shantae is truly like and discover why this belly dancing beauty has an impressive amount of booty. Here's a collection I played through half of, the Azura Striker Gunvolt Double Pack, containing both the first and second game. Now I owned the first on my 3DS and loved it, being very reminiscent of Mega Man X. And while I don't know what people think about its sequel, if it's anything like the first, then I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Besides, it's not like we're getting X9 anytime soon. This limited release is an odd case of yes and no, for Fire Emblem NES, or Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, is a game I've completed via its remake on the DS, and honestly, the game gets better with each playthrough, ugly ass sprites notwithstanding. So going back to the original, even with some quality of life features, is certainly going to be difficult, but it should be interesting to see how Fire Emblem began, and play a version where banter isn't complete crap. On the subject of Fire Emblem, I was actually gifted a code for the indie game Dark Deity. This title was certainly making the rounds within the community for a while, and I even got the chance to speak to one of the devs prior to its release. And while I haven't played the game yet, I know I'm awful, I hear the reception is mostly positive, so who knows, this might be the kind of thing to enjoy while we wait for the supposed FE4 remake. Turns out there's another pseudo Fire Emblem series going by the name of Langrissa, and I own the remakes of both the first and second game, which concurrently popped up within the fandom for a bit, as they were essentially Fire Emblem for primarily Sega systems, and I'd like to see how these games hold up. I also find it funny that there's a sizable number of titles that bear multiple parallels to FE, but you wouldn't know about them unless you actively search for such a game. Hopefully said Sleeping Dogs get more of an audience as Fire Emblem concurrently gains traction. This title, while not Fire Emblem related, does pertain various strategy elements, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom battle. Despite the highly questionable premise, this crossover is said to be pretty damn good and bolsters a sequel, with a number of my friends speaking very highly of this collab. Just ask Farrah how Luigi fared in his playthrough.
Here we go!
Plus, this is one of the Nintendo IP games that actually goes on sale pretty often, so keep an eye out for it if you're interested. Here's a title I didn't even pay for, as F-Zero 99 was a huge surprise, and from what I know of the game, and by that I mean watching my sister play it religiously, it's a serious keeper. Though apparently it feels more like a test run given the retro format, to finally see if it's worth moving forward with this franchise. Well, I certainly hope so, because this formula in F-Zero GX engine would easily leave Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing in the dust. If you want to talk about retro inspiration, look no further than Valhalla, a visual novel which my friends spoke very highly of, and while this type of game is outside my comfort zone, it was pretty cheap, and I'm always one to expand my horizons when it comes to gaming among other interests. Perhaps one of these days I'll actually play the original Fate Stay Night. Another game I wouldn't usually go for is Rune Factory 4. From what I gathered, these games are some of the greatest in the farming/dating sim market, and I have many friends who can testify to that claim. Being real for a minute, I struggle to enjoy the majority of farming sims, to the point where not even Animal Crossing can hold my attention. But something about the way Rune Factory looked had an irregular charm to its art style that I can vibe with, and I trust my buddies when they say this series is wonderful. The final game on my SD card is none other than Uno. Yeah, Uno. That card game millions of people play that I just so happen to own because fuck it, it could make for some fun with friends and community members. Plus I play Uno with my family a lot in real life, so I'm always up for a game no matter how spiteful things get. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. My final all-digital games collection that is the result of 10 years worth of purchases and games left to unfortunately fester on cloud servers. We all have it, and we're all guilty of letting it convulse into an unstoppable money pit. You all know it, and you all hate having it. The Steam library. Holy fuckballs is my Steam backlog atrocious! I've had this service for over a decade now, and because those godforsaken Steam sales are too tempting to pass up, plus the donations I've received from friends and fans, I've got a total of 60 unplayed games in this son of a bitch. So buckle up everyone, we're in the endgame now, so let's conquer this catalogue. The first assortment of games in this mountain of information are the 7th generation titles I missed out on, since I was either too young at the time, or I chose to spend my money on Wii games, the first being Assassin's Creed 2. Currently the only installment in the franchise I own, for this and Black Flag are often referred to as the best entries. Plus I wasn't keen on playing Assassin's Creed 1, which apparently hasn't aged very well. While I'm embarrassingly late to this party, I have a good feeling about this game since Ezio's adventure was heavily inspired by the Prince of Persia franchise, and those games are their own cave of wonders. Fittingly so, I'm hesitant to play Prince of Persia 2008, as it's often cited to be a mixed bag, which is a huge shame because the Sands of Time trilogy are games I absolutely adore, with Warrior Within being in my all-time top 30. Hopefully this ends up being more of a diamond than a rough, and as stated previously, you don't have to be the best to be good. Good old Batman Arkham Origins, the third game in the Arkham franchise and a somewhat weak entry based on the general reception, especially coming off the heels of Arkham City, but still considered pretty damn good, and as a man who loved both Asylum and City, I'm more than happy to suit up as the Batman once again, though I still don't own Arkham Knight, and if I ever do, it'll be on the PS4. I know it's probably fixed by now, but that PC port was legendary in its atrociousness. Talk about a franchise you could not escape in the late 2000s. BioShock was such a huge deal at the time, and their games are still considered highlights of the 7th generation. In fact, my brother has recently played the first one and loved it, so I'm curious to experience Rapture for myself, and if this series really is the big daddy the industry claims it to be. Much like BioShock, Borderlands was a big deal in the 7th generation, and is still rather relevant today. Yet I have never touched a single entry, but should really get around to doing so. As a matter of fact, my friend Calamity Calling loves Borderlands, and mentioned that while the first game doesn't hold up that well, the second and third game's DLCs are exceptional, so I may end up investing additional time and money into this looter shooter. Though I own Darksiders 2 on the Wii U, I did pick up the original, which came with the War Master edition, because I figured I may as well experience said humble beginnings. For those who have played these games, can I skip one and head straight into Darksiders 2? Also, is there a significant difference between the original and War Master version? Because some definitive editions don't end up being so absolute. Just look at how they fucked up Tales of Symphonia. Ooh, the horror classic Dead Space. Another big game from the 7th generation that recently got a remake. Now I heard about how incredible the first two Dead Space titles were, and I've shown continual interest in exploring this void based on the general reception. But last year my brother played through the series, and the original has now become one of his favourite games ever, thus I'm highly intrigued to see how extraordinary this fearful masterpiece really is. While not entirely horror related, we have the Castlevania Lords of Shadow series to get through, which I'll more than likely do this Halloween on Twitch, and while I know this subsection of Castlevania is somewhat contentious among the player base, it does have its fans, and heck, I played some of Mirror of Fate on the 3DS and enjoyed the snippets I got to digest. Plus, it's Castlevania, I can't exactly say no to some good old vampire hunting. Dragon's Dogma. I braved a decent chunk of this when I visited my buddy Cam in the States. He's a humongous fan of this game, and his posts on Twitter will make certain that you will play Dragon's Dogma. While I was down there, he was kind enough to show me the ropes, and I really enjoyed my time, and laughed my arse off at how jank the jumping and platforming was. I will certainly get around to fully completing this title, especially now that it received a sequel that appears to be just as good, if not superior to the original. Plus, dragons make everything better. Here's a weird situation of yes and no, since within the Halo Master Chief Collection, I have played the first 3 games, and sweet lord do I love me some Halo 2 and 3, but I haven't sampled any further entries, and while I know most of them are lesser than the classics, Halo Reach is a game many friends and family members cannot stop gushing about, and a title I've been putting off for far too long. So while I will play through the whole collection, Halo Reach is the real reason I want to finish this fight. Here's one I purely got for nostalgic reasons, LEGO Batman. Now I played the LEGO games in their infancy starting with the original LEGO Star Wars, but Batman was always my favourite of them, and the last LEGO game I experienced despite the series being literally everywhere. So yeah, while I have played with Batman's bricks before, I didn't complete the whole thing and my original disc got lost, so one day I'll finally close the book on this Bat chapter. God, I truly missed out on some of the biggest games of the 7th gen era, as I have yet to play Mass Effect, something I'm sure Deadly Small and Abyss Walker view as a cardinal sin. But at the very least, this one is in the backlog for when the time comes. Now I'm aware that Mass Effect 1 hasn't aged too well, and I could always get the Legendary Edition, but I feel like starting with the original, and if the experience is positive enough, then Mass Effect 2 will certainly be a great time, and I'm sure 3 will make for a nice end to the series. Yep, no other games to play after the fact. This one goes out to my brother, as I'm not the biggest fan of Mortal Kombat, but when I played MK9 with him, holy shit was it amazing, and to this day, it's considered to be one of the best fighting games ever. Funny enough, I bought this back in 2014, but my laptop couldn't run it for shit, and so I haven't touched it since. But I'm sure my current setup should be more than capable of making me rip someone's spine out in all its gory glory. Here we have the final Resident Evil game in my backlog, Revelations 2. Now, I loved Revelations on the 3DS and played the PC port last year during Halloween on Twitch, and while I haven't heard much about Rev 2, if it's more of the good stuff, then job well done. And heck, the game stars Claire Redfield, and I'm always happy to see her get the limelight, as she needed a break after having to deal with Steve in Code Veronica.
See? You can depend on me. You see? This thing is a lot more reliable than any person.
You know what? I'm glad you're dead. This is the last Tales game in my backlog, Tales of Berseria, an entry many of my friends adore and claim it to be one of the best in the series, and it too is a follower goal on my Twitch channel. Though at this point I may bite the bullet and play it very soon, it looks like so much fun, and I'm constantly being informed that Velvet is one of the best protagonists in a video game, which is an impressive feat. Also, Berseria goes on sale tremendously often across multiple platforms, to the point where I think everyone owes it to themselves to at least try it out for cheap. And so we're at the final game of my late to the party Gen 7 assembly. And if you feel like a zombie for sticking around this long, well, that's fitting since Telltale's The Walking Dead I have yet to finish. And truth be told, I did watch one of my friends from university play through the second chapter, as well as binge SGB's playthrough of it. So I'm aware of the outcome, but I do want to try it for myself, given all the scenarios regarding the cast. Though I do have a solid idea about who's getting axed straight out of the gate. Next, let's cover some games I was gifted, starting with Honey Pop. And well, this isn't the kind of thing I would purchase outright, but it's the thought that counts, and I do hear that when you look past all the tits and ass, this is a pretty fun game, so I do have something to look forward to that doesn't involve trying to get my rocks off to pixelated waifus. That's what Fire Emblem and Xenoblade are for.
Oh my!
Mirror is another game I did not ask for but got gifted by the same person who sent Honey Pop my way. And just like before, a gift is the only way I would consider looking at this title, as it's not exactly my idea of entertainment. But hey, the artwork does look nice, and I'm not talking about the neuron activation. So, remember how I own the first 3 Trails of Cold Steel games? Well, Trails of the Sky predates those titles and was a gift from none other than Choops, or Chaz if you will, who some of you may know from his various Fire Emblem and Trails videos, which he sent my way after we met up for pizza while I was in the States. It was a great time. But yeah, though I know little about Trails of the Sky, it does perpetuate significant acclaim, and the fact that this was a gift shows that Chaz thinks it's definitely worth playing, and I'm sure it'll make me feel like I'm on cloud 9. Since I spoke so highly of the Wario Land games earlier in this video, it's not surprising that I would have Pizza Tower in my catalogue, though this game was also a gift, and from what I've seen and heard, this is basically an unofficial Wario Land 5. Which is perfectly fine by me, and hopefully the game's success will give Nintendo the incentive to have Wario do more than just microgames for the millionth time. Skyborn is the last Steam freebie that I received from the wonderful devs at Dancing Dragon Games, the same peeps that brought us Symphony of War, another title I sampled that should satiate your Fire Emblem fix. I can't say much about this game, but I trust that the team did a great job if my experience with their other work is anything to go off. Plus, some of those portraits are just gorgeous, and I'm always a sucker for some pretty 2D artwork. The next category of games is what I like to call puzzlers, because the real puzzler is trying to figure out why I got them in the first place, as I honest to God do not remember the circumstances leading up to their acquisition, starting with the purchase of Ghost 1.0, but looking through the description, I see that this game is a Metroidvania, so the rest is history. I am fortunate to be going in blind, which is a rarity these days, given the exuberant amounts of information we are privy to, something I find to be rather refreshing, as if the game itself were a phantom. This is a peculiar part of my collection, Heroines of Sword and Spells, and yep, I have no clue how this game even got there. I don't remember if this was a code from the developers, a gift, or if I bought it on a whim, though the reviews seem to be good and it looks to be reminiscent of old school Final Fantasy, so clearly there's much merit to this escapade, though I doubt I'll ever discover how it ended up in my Steam library. La Mulana is another game I don't fully remember the circumstances of how I came to own it, but knowing that it's a Metroidvania makes it more than worthy to be part of my collection. And here's a fun bit of trivia. Turns out this game dates back to 2006 and was even available on WiiWare for a while, which gives me hope that other WiiWare titles will soon get re-released because I need an official copy of Castlevania Rebirth. How I came to own Momodora in my collection escapes me, but seeing that it's a Metroidvania does explain a lot. I guess I just subconsciously grab these games when I can. For what it's worth, the reviews are excellent, and the cave story graphical style is very charming, so this should have me dancing in the moonlight. The tale of Time Spinners is as old as time itself, and the last of this particular bracket. In that I don't remember how and why I got this game, but once I realised it's a Metroidvania with incredible reviews, I put 2 and 2 together. Just from looking at the screenshot, you can practically taste the Castlevania inspiration, and I'm curious to see how the whole time gimmick is implemented, because if done right, reality manipulation can be a great addition and should make for a wonderful time. Now we have a subsection of titles that I like to call referral games. Titles specifically purchased because people on YouTube whose content I enjoy exposed me to said software, with some Call Me Johnny being responsible for at least 90% of these investments. The first of these published works is Breed, being an action mech game which is already a plus, but while I don't remember the exact video it appeared in, the Quarter Guy featured it in one of his countdowns, and something about the way he described the experience really clicked with me, so clearly it's gotta be something good. The indie scene is where the Metroidvania genre thrives, and Axiom Verge is one of the most well-known titles within this category. This is one of the many smaller indie games I got thanks to Johnny's review of it, and given my love for Metroidvanias, I think I'm in for a good time. Plus, you can further thank Johnny for my choice to acquire Bastion, as I personally wouldn't give this game a second glance, given that I genuinely don't play isometric adventures. But the critical response must be a testament to the game's quality, so fingers crossed that this one is a keeper. Here we go again with another Johnny-approved indie game, for Cave Story Plus has been around for a while and received much critical acclaim, and I managed to sample this game at the Barbican in London during one of their exhibitions regarding digital technology, and it was pretty fun for the 10 minutes I experienced, so at least we're off to a good start. Celeste Axe is a more recent indie title that has been praised to hell and back, which I once again procured thanks to good old Johnny. Plus, I know a few friends who love this game, and something about the box art also fascinates me. It was probably the strawberry. Thus, this should be a rather sweet treat to play through. One of the simultaneously earliest indie games and Johnny's reviews, Dust and Elysian Tale seems to be ticking all the right boxes for me. Beautiful sprites, an action hack and slash with Metroidvania elements, yes sir, sign me up. Plus, other YouTubers are no stranger to singing this game's praises, so I'm sure this will be a tale worth telling. Freedom Planet was an unsurprisingly Johnny-influenced purchase, and to be fair, with a game that's so heavily inspired by classic Sonic, you'd expect no less. I did play this game for a spell and got through a number of stages, with the experience being an overall great time because I adore the personality and flow of the game's world and cast. Now that there's a sequel, clearly this is an excellent way to get my classic Sonic fix without having to play as the Blue Blur. Both Guacamelee Gold and Super Turbo Champion Edition were the result of Johnny once again, and the last set of games I bought primarily because of him, being well-regarded standouts of the Metroidvania genre, which is an automatic plus in my book. I honestly don't know why I own both Gold and Super Turbo Champion Edition, but please let me know if there's any major differences between the two, and if either of them can be skipped or prioritized, given that I'm a first-time player. The remainder of my Steam backlog are games I simply have not played yet. Either that, or I started them but never got around to finishing. Kicking things off with the Metroidvania, Blasphemous. A title I hear monumental praise for, and something my sister enjoyed significantly. And given her love for Metroid, I trust her judgment on this quest, further benefited by the fact that there's also a sequel, so the devs can look forward to that little extra pocket change if my first time is pleasant enough. Fuck me, is this a game I can never escape, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. Another follower goal on my Twitch page, and something I get asked a lot by fans if I have and or will play at some point. Adding to that, many of my friends love this series, and it appears a lot in my socials, as if to actively taunt me. Thankfully, I'm primarily going into this game blind despite all the exposure, and I'm sure it'll be fascinating among other things. My only prerequisite is that Kaede is a sweetheart.
I've got the goods!
This game I'm not particularly familiar with, despite being one of the newer titles I own, Disco Elysium. I remember seeing a multitude of trailers for it, and said software ended up garnering various awards during ceremonies throughout 2019, so clearly that counts for a lot, and please let me know in the comments if this case is all it's cracked up to be. Here's something I've sort of played, Doki Doki Literature Club, an out of nowhere title that took the internet by storm and still remains one of the best indie games out there. My experience with this mindfuck is when my friend Hikari and I streamed the story a number of years ago, and we dubbed over the dialogue, which was pretty fun, though I only got to sit through one of the various endings, so there's plenty more for me to experience, though I'm not sure my mind's ready to do so. I really hate myself for not giving these classics the time of day, but yes, after playing Doom 2016, I gathered up all the older Doom games for Steam, none of which I ever touched aside from the original, which my buddy had on his Xbox 360, and made for some fun multiplayer sessions. What else can be said about Doom? It's a fucking classic, and I'm sure that despite age kicking in, these are going to be a rip-roaring great time. Doom 2016 sequel Eternal was a game I had to unfortunately drop due to technical limitations, as my previous PC really struggled to run this son of a bitch, and so after roughly 3 hours of game time dealing with multiple crashes among other problems, I said fuck it and left the Doomslayer on hiatus. Thankfully, my current PC is more than powerful enough to handle this monster, and with Dark Ages on the horizon, the sooner I get back to slaughtering demons, the better. Another game I dropped shortly into the adventure was DuckTales Remastered, a remake of the NES classic and something I was loving, from the visuals, the performances, to that classic side-scrolling action, and fuck me, the soundtrack slaps so hard. I'm no stranger to playing high-quality Disney games throughout my childhood, and this goldmine is something I should definitely store in the memory banks once the adventure is over. Here's a fun little game that popped up not too long ago, A Hat in Time, which from the get-go was a very cute 3D platformer that reminded me a lot of Banjo-Kazooie, so naturally I was intrigued and decided to purchase it but have yet to give it the time of day. I know an assortment of people who really love this game, and 3D platformers are my favourite genre, yes, even more so than Metroidvanias, so I'm certain this will be worth every second spent. This baby has festered in the black matter of my brain for years now, because anyone who's played Dark Souls or Metroidvanias knows about Hollow Knight, and I have no doubt it's going to be an amazing time. So much so that it's a follower goal on my Twitch page, and my buddy Wolffox could write a goddamn Bible about how it's a marvel of a video game, and I would believe every word he wrote. So my excitement is through the stratosphere, and I hope that fans get some Silksong news sooner rather than later. Icy was a game I believe Steam itself recommended to me, and after looking at all the screenshots, I was really vibing with the whole anime dystopian mecha atmosphere, as if Nier and Metal Gear would have a baby. Hopefully the game plays as well as it looks and doesn't leave me feeling cold. My choice to purchase Mighty Switch Force is the result of enjoying much of WayForward's productions, helped by the game's status as a puzzle platformer. I'm aware that this is one of WayForward's earlier escapades, so it may not be as flashy or polished as their more contemporary work, but as the saying goes, you can't beat a classic. This game has piqued my interest for years now, Ori and the Blind Forest, an enchanted adventure everyone and their mother has raved about, describing it as nothing short of incredible, and everything on display is music to my ears. Amazing visuals and sound, it's a Metroidvania, plus there's a sequel that's claimed to be just as good if not better than the first. Oh, I know I'm going to adore this magical marvel. Much like Disco Elysium, Outer Wilds is a game that bears a more contemporary placement within my library, which I became aware of through social media and the multitude of accolades that it accumulated. Not to mention, it's got a bunch of DLCs too, so if I enjoyed my time, I can look forward to getting more bang for my buck. Despite not having played Rune Factory 4 yet, I still went ahead and snagged Rune Factory 5, for friends of mine said it was pretty good despite being not as strong as its predecessor, and I trust their verdict, though I do feel strange not owning both games for the same system. But apparently the Switch version has performance issues, and that's no good. On a brighter note, one of the characters is voiced by Sephiroth from Three Houses, which will certainly make my playthrough feel very surreal.
I see you are hard at work.
When I first started getting into RWBY, I was delighted to discover the series has a number of video games under its belt, but the only one I currently own is Grim Eclipse, which I believe to be their first attempt at simulation software, and based on the reviews, it certainly seems that way, though I have no doubt that this will be a fun experience. However, I'm not as big of a RWBY fan as I was back then, and thus there will be no rose-tinted glasses to hide whatever blemishes befall this beast. By the way, for those who still watch the show, did the series pick up after Season 8? Please let me know, but do remember to be civil about the subject. I find it ironic that the first fighting game I bought for the Steam has yet to be played, as Skullgirls was met with wondrous acclaim when it began circulating, and the franchise seems to have flourished throughout the years thanks to updates and all that good stuff. While I may have missed out on playing against others at the height of its popularity, I'm sure this will be a satisfying slugfest, and the art style is wonderful stuff. You really feel the energy and vigor behind each pixel. It's a crime that I haven't played Sonic Mania yet, for anyone and everyone has made it known that this is one of, if not the best Sonic games of all time, and now we have Mania Plus with added content, thus there's no excuse to avoid this magnum opus. Though I must ask if I should bite the bullet and upgrade to Mania Plus, or give the vanilla version a try and then upgrade if I like what I played. Running parallel with Code Realize, I watched and adored the Steins Gate anime. It's one of my all-time favorites, though I was shocked to discover that this was originally a video game, and so I'm curious to see how the events unfold in its primal format, as well as if there's anything exclusive to the game that the multitude of anime adaptations have excluded, and whether that was for the best. Once again, despite maining Strider in the Capcom Vs games, I'm scarcely familiar with his solo adventures, which is a shame since the reboot is considered to be incredible and goes for a Metroidvania approach. Plus, based on the snippets I've seen, I think I'm really gonna love this one. Heck, perhaps it'll make me a hardcore fan and I'll try and snag Strider 2 on the PlayStation. Oh fuck that! Holy shit, it feels like a lifetime ago since Super Meat Boy was conceived, being one of the first indie games to make it big, and I have no doubt it's earned its legendary status, as just about everyone who plays the game comments on how great yet ball-bustingly hard it can be, so I'm certain that the pain will be more than worth the pleasure that comes from stomaching this tender steak. Now we're getting totally retro up in this, for Tron 2.0 came out in 2003, which I conscripted because Tron is a franchise so near and dear to my heart. I love just about everything related to this series, and I don't care what anyone says, Tron Evolution is awesome. In spite of some jank, Tron 2.0 is regarded to be a pretty damn good game, and an interesting what-if story considering Legacy is now the canon sequel, so I'm curious to decipher what the grid has in store for me. We have arrived at the final game in my mountain of a backlog, Umineko When They Cry, a title in which a number of my friends have played and spoken very highly of, and since I'd like to be exposed to more visual novels, I figured that this would be a good one to sink my teeth into. Little did I know that the entire thing averages at a whopping 130 hours. How in the holy mother of fuck do you make a visual novel that long? Well, at the very least, if the game's quality is on point, it'll be time extensively well spent. I cannot believe it, but we've finally covered every single godforsaken video game in my chasm of a backlog. I really appreciate you all for sticking around to the very end, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. Oh, is that how it is? You really gonna do this to me, broski? Oh, come on, man, not now. You promised. You over here yapping about backlogs, and you just gonna ignore me? Fire Emblem Frasier 776? Dude, I technically don't own you, and I ain't dedicating an entire segment to games I've emulated, otherwise Nintendo's gonna have my ass. How can you be a Fire Emblem YouTuber, and yet you still ain't beaten me yet? What kind of sense does that make? Look, my guy, I will complete you. Someday, I promise. It's just that I've got other games to play. Plus, you're old and kinda jank, so it's not easy to remain invested. Bruh, I ain't jank. I'm just unique. Whatever. You seriously gonna throw me under the bus while I'm the last effing game you gotta play? How you out here complaining you ain't got no time for me, and you can put over 700 hours into Fire Emblem Three Houses? Probably because my game's actually fun, bitch boy. Frasier, dude, just chill, alright? One of these days, I will finish your game. You mark the foreseeable end to my journey as a Fire Emblem fan. And you know, that means a lot. Once you're complete, until we get news of the next mainline Fire Emblem game, that's it. I would technically have played them all. So I want to make sure that my time with you is something special, dude. Alright, you know what? I get it, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize that this whole situation was kind of a big deal. If it means that much to you, I'm happy to wait. Thanks for understanding, man. I got you. So, do you think the next time you get the urge to play Fire Emblem is going to be with me? Oh, absolutely. Right after I've done a Hexa Hard Mode Iron Man run, Azura Moon Maddening, Fate Solo for all 3 paths, my second playthrough of Fire Emblem Engage, both Shadow Dragon and new mystery playthroughs using Bantu, and another round of Fire Emblem Echoes. So yeah, pretty soon. He'll be fine. In all seriousness, thank you all for watching today. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you have any knowledge about any of the games in my backlog, please give me the heads up about what I'm getting myself into, and your experiences with said games. Also, feel free to share your backlog in the comments, as myself and many other users could perhaps give insight into what you've got to look forward to. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, as well as follow me on Twitter, Discord and Twitch, and for those who would like to go the extra mile, please consider pledging to my Patreon to help support this channel and receive additional bonuses for doing so. And speaking of which, I want to say an enormous thank you to all my patrons who literally made this video possible, as many of you have contributed to my backlog either through recommendations, gifts, all that stuff, and I can't thank you enough for all those things. I'm looking forward to many of these games from your stories, playing it with you, and just seeing seeing the stuff that you've done. Oh god. I'm really looking forward to a lot of these games. I hope to get round to them sooner rather than later, but you know, the backlog is bad. Sorry. But seriously, thank you all so much for the support, everything. I really appreciate that. You made this video possible in many ways, both in a metaphorical and a literal sense. So I can't thank you enough, and just thank you for everything, as always, within the server and all that stuff. You guys are just so amazing. And I'd like to say a very special thank you to Wolffox, Lucina21, Jeremy Redinger, Glentrog750, Chaos Saberlight, VC Videos 100, Starship 9, Midnight Castle, Maggiefall, Baron8392, Daniel Hodgson, Isaac A. Flores, and Zenny Dragon. Big thank you to all of you so much. I really, really do love you all from the bottom of my heart. Mwah! Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you all next time.